Good evening, race fans, and welcome here to the third race of the TNR Sunday Super Speedway Series as drivers now prepare to tackle iRacing Super Speedway. 3 miles in length, it'll be the longest super speedway that these drivers will deal with on the schedule, and after two really exciting finishes to start out the season, Daytona saw 35 one-thousandths of a second the difference for the win. Last week, the closest finish so far of 16 one-thousandths of a second. It'll be interesting to see what happens here today. I'm Seth Cole, alongside of Anthony McCurry, and Anthony, obviously, a lot more space at this racetrack, a lot more length. What does that mean now in terms of the racing styles we'll see today as opposed to the first two races on the schedule?
The first two races being at traditionally the most well-known super speedways in the world. They know how to drive those tracks. They're thin and they are long, but this track is another level. This track goes 3 miles in length and it's so wide. You have plenty of space to work around. You have plenty of space. If you want to take it 4 wide, you can very easily at this racetrack. You could even take it 5 and 6 wide if you feel lucky enough. And the turns, the banking is so much steeper than it is at Talladega, Daytona, and the like. We should see some interesting racing throughout the turns. We should see some interesting racing throughout the day. Extremely fast track. Speed's going to be cracking into the 200s. It's going to be a fun race.
We ended up seeing 11 drivers take the green flag in the season opener at Daytona. That was a track that usually only has 3 lanes available, and we saw them use all 3 of those lanes during the course of that race. Only 10 drivers scheduled to roll off the grid here today. A thing that I was watching in practice, I think we're going to have to keep an eye on, is what we've seen pretty much the entire of the season so far. Those 2-car tandems. The question is, though, with these much longer straightaways on the front and back, just how long are they going to be able to stay locked up before they have to really worry about those water temps, especially for the car that's doing the pushing?
They probably won't be able to stay as locked up as they'd like to, especially considering that they'd want to stay connected going down the entirety of the straightaway. These are some very long straights at this track. It's the track shape is very similar to, say, Homestead or even a New Hampshire, given the fact that it's 2 very long straights coupled by some pretty sharp by comparison turns. So locking up, going down the straightaways, basically pushing all the way down, makes some interesting drag racing, and we should definitely keep an eye on the water temps for these drivers because they will be right on the edge by the time they hit the turns.
It's going to be an all-Toyota front row as Mike Tellier is going to grab the pole position. He'll be alongside of Shane Tyrion in the number 88 here, making his first start on the season, as is our broadcast colleague Michael Norman in that Hot Wheels Ford Mustang. He'll be rolling off third alongside of second in points Austin Grover, who could, based off of Jason Gracias not in the field today, could be our new points leader heading into next week's race. Row 3 is going to find last week's winner, Vincent Valvano, alongside of Kyle Lewis's number 18. And then the final 2 rows, drivers did not take time. It'll be David Durand in the 24. He'll be rolling off from 7th. Matthew Rodriguez alongside of him in 8th, and actually 9th will be Jason Shue. We did have 10 drivers that looked like we're going to be taking the green flag. Looks like only 9 in total. We'll be preparing here for this 55-lap main event feature. Mike Tellier brings them down, and we are racing at the iRacing Super Speedway. Norman trying to push Mike Tellier out in front by the time they get to turn 1. Shane Tyrion's got Austin Grover up there on the top side, and you notice there, not that easy for the 83 and the 88 to lock up the bumpers. Looks like actually Grover has thoughts about going around Shane Tyrion. He's got Kyle Lewis as his wingman, and look at Vincent Valvano wasting no time. He'd love to go 2 in a row as he jumps to the middle. Not much drafting help available to him right there, though, as the 97-21 remain lined up nose to tail down against that yellow line.
A large group forming on the inside line, about 4 cars. The 18 of Lewis having a bit of a bobble going into turn 3, but gathers it back up and gets back connected. And now Michael Norman steps out of line, tries to take the lead over Mike Tellier. Can he get to the lead of the race? He does, and he's got help on the high line. He's got Lewis, he's got Valvano on the outside following him, trying to push him down the straightaway, but the guy behind, not so adamant about being the pusher. He's trying to go around the outside. That's Shane Tyrion.
Right now, it would be advantage to the Toyotas as they have 4 Supras in the field. You've also got, that would actually be Camrys here with the 20 13 cars. You've also got 3 Chevrolets and 2 Fords in the field, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any alliance with manufacturers. And you see that 24 car there of David Durand running the second position. I'll tell you what, if there's a driver that's maybe more motivated here today to find victory lane, it might be the driver of the Drive to End Hunger Chevrolet, because the last 2 weeks, Daytona, Talladega, he's led the most laps, but he's yet to be able to find victory lane. Daytona, he was in the grass on the final lap, able to save it, but brought it home in 8th, and last week finished just inside the top 5 in 5th.
Definitely put together some great runs, and if he can stay consistent throughout this race, he has a good shot at doing it. We've seen him be able to stay at the front and be able to hold off everybody behind him a little bit better than I think that we've seen any other drivers do. But right now, falling back, actually almost on the outside line, and we had a guy on the inside get off the track. That's Matthew Rodriguez that goes off track onto the apron trying to avoid contact. I think there was a shot that he took to the back, might have been the 21 of Norman that sent him around, or at least tried to send him around, or maybe pushing in the middle of the turn. It didn't quite work out. But what Durand's got to do is bide his time. He doesn't have to stay out in front the entire time. He can ride back. We know he's got speed right now, running an extremely high line, trying to get some speed, maybe trying to get to the back of the pack. But as long as you can make it to the end of the race, be in the right spot at the right time, we can see this 24 in the winner's circle.
Let's bear in mind also what we talked about last week when we were at Talladega. There is no out of bounds. You see that yellow area down there, which looks like a no passing zone between the racing surface and that access road off of pit lane. That is considered in bounds, as would be this apron here on the back straightaway below this yellow line. So that's something that drivers have to keep their minds on when we get to the end of this race, that they don't have to worry about the 5 lanes available here on the racing surface. There's another 2 or 3 lanes down there as well that they're going to have to block.
And nowhere is safe on this racetrack, given that it's already wide up on the racing surface, and then you add the back straightaway's apron runoff as a potential racing platform. It's extremely wide, and you can make some moves. Now on the front straightaway here, you see it on the inside, 2-car tandem trying to get to the front of the field, bypassing the 57 of Rodriguez. That's the 83 on the bottom of Grover, pushing Shane, or make that Vincent Valvano on the inside.
Got 3 pairs of 2-car tandems that were going on there. You had Durand pushing Lewis, you had Tyrion being pushed by Valvano, and you had Tellier, who I believe was pushing the 83 of Austin Grover, and they were all making up a lot of speed there. It's going to be the 18 of Lewis out in front here with the 24 of David Durand. So these guys already 5 laps in, experimenting with who they can hook up with, create the most speed, and maybe also just how long they can push for.
That's a big thing, trying to figure out when you can push and when it's best not to, is I think what these drivers are feeling out. I've noticed that no one's been able to really get out in front and stay out there. Right now, Kyle Lewis leading the way, but no one seems to get far away, even during a 2-car tandem. You'll see now to the inside, Durand's locked up with the 83 of Grover. They'll push out and they'll try to get a good lead going, but on the outside, even still, you see someone that's not a draft, a 2-car tandem, catching up. That was Rodriguez until he gets left out to dry. But the inside, no one can get away and no one can distance themselves from the rest of the field. So that might be something that these leaders will have to bear in mind, that you don't want to time your run too early, get to the lead, and then be a sitting duck.
Austin Grover right now, just obviously he's looking for his first victory on the season. He's the only driver so far this year that's had back-to-back top 5 finishes in the first 2 races. But more importantly here today, he is poised to take the points lead over heading into next week. He was only 5 points back behind our Daytona winner Jason Gracias, and Gracias not on the grid, not in the field here today. So he's going to try and open up a gap back to some other drivers that could have good points days today. David Durand and Vincent Valvano, last week's winner. Those 2 drivers came into this race 3rd and 4th, 40 and 42 points back respectively.
And that's a lot of work for these drivers that are going to try to make up onto the points lead. And if you're Valvano or anybody else that has got a lot of momentum coming in from Talladega, then this is the place to do it. And relatively easy to drive, and you can get a good run going, especially with one driver not in the field. This is the place to make some moves if you need to make them. Something that I have noticed also during this race, the inside line of the entrance to turn 1 and turn 3 look awful loose for these drivers. It looks like that they're having some struggles as you see the outside line kind of get in and then dodge up the racetrack. It's almost the car is being pushed up to the racetrack. There's a bit of a bump down there, unsettles the car. That might be something that they have to be aware about when they're battling 3 and 4 wide racing at the end of the race. You don't want to have something terrible happen that upsets your car and sends you up into somebody else. But there's a 3-car tandem on the outside line going to the lead of the race.
And it is all Toyotas, and they are going to go 1, 2, 3, Lewis, Tellier, and Tyrion. But now Lewis drops down, Tellier stays up with Tyrion. Those two going to work together here down the back straightaway. Now, for those that are looking at this track visually and are saying, this looks quite familiar, iRacing Superspeedway was formerly known from 2002 to 2020 as Coca-Cola Superspeedway. A lot of people will remember that on the Enter 2003 sim. And you talk about the fact that we're seeing these cars push up in the corner. There is a dip down area going into 1 and going into 3 that is going to unsettle the race cars here. That's something these drivers are going to have to worry about, and that's why I kind of made the point when we were in the first early laps of this race about drivers in that middle outside line lining up the bumpers, because first you got to make sure that that car settles back down after the bump, then you got to try and figure out where your front bumper is in relation to the back bumper of the car you were pushing on the straightaway.
The worst thing that can happen for drivers being pushing in the middle of the turns and all of a sudden have the back end wash out and then the front end locks with the driver in front and both of you are going up to the outside wall. Not a fun feeling. Don't recommend it for anybody. Right now, they're kind of settling into a run. I thought they would be settling into a run, but what we've been seeing right now, I say that...
Oh my lord, how in the world is Mike Tellier still going? They had the entire right front tire off the ground.
Pops up the right front, but stays straight. Damage on the 97. I don't know if it's going to be enough that it's going to cause any front or straight line speed, rather. He's still getting pushed. But there is some very noticeable damage on the front of the 97. He is slow. I say that, and he's now got a whale of a run, trying to take it somewhere to the inside line, perhaps. The extreme inside line, the apron line. There's contact.
Flips Michael Norman. They're both going to go into the wall. No caution yet. Now the caution is out. That was a 4-wide situation that, in all honesty, was just never going to happen going into the narrow entrance of turn 1.
I had started the thought by saying that they looked like they were trying to settle out and run some laps under a bit of a train, but they did not do that. They instead got racier, and I think this was just both cars wanted to be in the same place at the racetrack. They were 4 wide, almost 5 wide going into turn 1. That is dangerous in of itself, but then you had 2 cars turn down. You had Lewis and Norman both try to make the corner, and it just makes some contact. There were some drivers in the spot, and then both of them go up into the outside wall. Just too little room, well, plenty of room, but no one was on the same page.
Took a look first there. It was replay worthy of the Travis Pastrana-esque save by Mike Tellier with that right front popping up into the air. And now we'll take a look at what happened over in turn 1. Actually, for a brief moment, it might have been 5 wide, as I think Norman was alongside of Rodriguez way up on the outside line there. And, that's some hard hits there for both the 21 and the 18. Bear in mind, they do have faster pairs available here, but I think one driver that might be breathing a sigh of relief with this caution coming out was the guy you were just documenting that had just received that right front damage in Mike Tellier.
Yeah, Tellier is definitely going to be thinking his lucky stars that he can come down and get a faster pair on that 97. It didn't look like it was too much off the pace, but it certainly did seem that something was amiss on the 97 from the contact. But this is a good reset for these drivers. They had just tested the water to see what their cars can do in a big group of cars, and you can run 3 wide pretty comfortably, and you can run 4 wide pretty comfortably. But it seems like when we get to 5 wide racing, that's about where the straw runs out. What I did, there is something that I did notice going into that turn, is that when you have drivers that are all on different pages and trying to run different lines, you do have the ability to, or you do have the threat of having cars be in places that you didn't expect them to be at. At a place like Daytona and Talladega, it's pretty much cut and dry where you can and cannot be on the racetrack. Given that Daytona is 2.5 to 3 lanes at most, and Talladega 3 to 3.5 lanes. This track being so large, you might not be aware that there's a guy to your outside, other than your spotter telling you there is somebody up there. He could be up against the wall, you could be down on the apron, and there's so much gap between you and the driver to your outside or inside that you don't really know exactly where they're at on the racetrack. And so what I think we saw there was two cars went down towards the inside of the racetrack. One driver just continued to stay straight, trying to run a middle line, and they met in the middle. That's something that you don't see at many tracks, but you see it here because of the track being so wide.
And I would also venture to just kind of build off of that to say that, especially with the room you've got there, about 4 or 5 lanes available, you could approach the corners here, especially the entrance of the corner, almost Speedway-esque. If you're at a Daytona or a Talladega, if you're on the top side going into turn 3, you're going to be committed to that top side by the time you come out of turn number 4. And if you do change lanes, there's going to be a smooth transition. Here, you can start from the top, drive it down deep to the inside line, so the moves are a lot more evasive, a lot more aggressive, and then drivers reacting to said move, it could end up leading to a lot of what we saw right there. Another thing I want to ask you, when we saw the 18 drive into the corner there, he seemed to kind of drive it down rather than into the corner, and that's where he made the contact with Shane Tyrion. Was that maybe in reaction to expecting that the car was going to push up about that groove and a half?
It could have been. He could have been preparing for the push up into the turn. He also might have been trying to avoid Michael Norman on the outside because they had both had some contact going into the turn, and then Norman went to the outside to try and get the jump on the 18. What happened was is they both went to the inside, and maybe Lewis was reacting to Michael Norman's attack on the outside line as we had a very late dive for pit road, and I think that was the 57 of Rodriguez on a late dive to pit road. But reaction to multiple drivers on that last time around, that might have been a result of that. And plus, Lewis, like you said, trying to set himself up for the entrance of turn 1, knowing that his car was going to push up. But the irony there is that because him and Norman were so close together, that if the car had pushed up the racetrack and Norman's hadn't done as much or even at all, then we could have seen them making contact going in on the outside line rather than making contact with Tyrion on the inside.
So Valvano, as you saw there at the start-finish line, that is the choose cone. He elects the inside line. Lewis will jump up to the top. Michael Norman, who would have rolled off from second place, will now be rolling off third. Second car on the inside line. David Durand will be fourth, with Mike Tellier completing the top 5. We've seen the last couple of weeks incidents at Daytona and Talladega where drivers have been able to soldier on, not having to use a faster pair. But there's 36 degrees of banking here at iRacing Superspeedway, and an incident in the corner is more than likely going to send the race cars involved up and into that outside safer barrier. The impacts are going to be violent enough that it's more than likely going to send them to have to use their faster pairs, and that has been the case for both Norman and Lewis. So 13 laps into this race, still a long ways to go, not even at the halfway point. They're already a faster pair in the hole. Now, Mike Tellier, on the other hand, he did not take on a faster pair. He's been to pit road a couple of times here under this caution period. We'll see just how up to speed he is. Still dealing with that little bit of a ruffle around the right front tire fender.
As we set them back up for our restart, it'll be Vincent Valvano and Kyle Lewis, your front row. Then it'll be Michael Norman, Mike Tellier, David Duran, and Austin Grover will make up the top 6. More drivers on the inside than the outside line. Valvano looking to go 2 wins in a row. He did it last week at Talladega. Can he go back-to-back? We're still very early on, but he leads us under our first restart. Everyone pretty even on the start.
Valvano might have gotten too good a start. And look at Shane Tyrion up the middle, timed that restart perfectly. He wanted to, I think, make it 3 wide for the lead, but instead, Lewis is going to block him, and that push from the 88 is going to get Kyle Lewis to the front, I do believe. Norman's blue oval, though, about to get up there to Valvano. They'll be dead even for the top spot. 18:38 down the back straightaway.
On the outside line, though, the momentum coming in from Lewis and Tyrion as they take the lead of the race. On the inside, you've got a 3-car tandem, make it a 4-car tandem now between make that Duran, Valvano, and the like. Well, Duran is out in front. Now, everyone dipping to the inside line. This is the fastest way around the track. The outside line, while it is fine to run up there, the way the banking here is and how wide the track is, it's not worth running the outside line. You will lose time going up there, so that's why everyone tries to duck down to the inside to get to the turns. You don't really scrub off any speed by going down there as opposed to some other places where you might have to scrub off a little bit of speed to make the corner. But running around the inside, Kyle Lewis takes the lead, hasn't looked back. He's got Tyrion right behind him, and David Duran has fallen in place.
taking a look there for second place on Shane Tyrion. Tried to get the momentum down the front straightaway, put the two left sides down below the yellow line, which is legal in this series, but he couldn't generate enough of a run to get the left rear quarter panel of that 88. Michael Norman looks like he may be just moving out of line to drop to the back. Of course, remember, he's got a faster pair already used, so he's got to survive now for the remainder of this race to try and stay around in the end for a chance of winning. As looks like Shane Tyrion might be doing the same here. I wonder if this is him dropping back to get out of harm's way, or the fact that he was running so long on the back bumper of the 18 might be starting to see those water temps peg. And look at that! 1, 2, 3 cars fan out on the front straightaway there, taking it 3 wide for the top spot. Tellier with a big run, almost took the race lead.
Yeah, almost did. He had the momentum, but then ran out of steam. He had no one to go with him. Now he's got a friend behind him. That ducks to the inside of him to try to make up some ground, but no one is going to help the 38 of Alvano. Down to the outside, Tellier's got friends in the form of Tyrion and Rodriguez on the outside line, and it seems like Durand sees the progression of the outside, wants to join a part of it. He's now at the outside, but Tellier, with a evasive maneuver to the middle of the racetrack, will take the lead. Can he get in front of Lewis? Oh, he does, just barely, though.
And they were 4 wide behind him with Grover, Valvano, Tyrion, and Durand. Durand way up on the top side there, going to drop to the back of the field. Oh, Lewis! I think he got the outside safer barrier there with that aggressive move to the right.
He did. I think just the tiniest touch was all it did. 4 wide for
Look
a
at
moment.
Rodriguez.
Whoa! With a run up the middle of the racetrack, the 57 takes the lead of the race, and Austin Grover will now be in second place. That was probably a move that he might have been learning how to do so he could set up a run as the 83 of Grover checks up the track, and Tellier gets in the back of him awful hard to the outside line, pushing Grover down the back straightaway. He will take the lead. Tellier to second as he gets run off the road. Rodriguez gets run off the road.
And he's going to be able to come back up, slot in front of Albano. That was a close call there. Midway down the back straightaway.
Whoa!
Oh, no, Grover! What a save by both Tellier and Grover. That should have been a wreck. That probably should have been the entire field. How did they keep that thing straight?
Look at the inside. Shane Tyrion smells blood in the water. He's gone all the way to the inside of the racetrack. He takes the lead of the race. But look at Kyle Lewis again slotting up the outside line. He'll take the lead again. Valvano in the middle. This is chaos. And we're not even halfway through as Durand now gets shot to the outside. There they go.
That's Rodriguez, Tellier, Austin Grover, all torn up there in the center of 1 and 2. Durand, as you mentioned, up and into the wall. 4-car incident going to bring out the second caution of the day.
And that was a big one. A lot of hard shots taken to the outside. Tellier has got some heavy damage on his car. Rodriguez, smoking engine for the 57. I'm not sure if he used his fast repair. We'll take a look really quickly. He still has a fast repair, so that's not end of the race for the 57 crew, but some hard hits nonetheless.
Definitely, and part of this was the David Durand 24 getting out of shape going into turn 1. Contact between him and Vincent Valvano sends him up into the wall, and then might have maybe been a bad bump from Rodriguez into the right rear quarter panel of Austin Grover, but then that shoots him up into Mike Tellier, and boy, good thing for Mike Tellier that he didn't take the fast repair on from the early damage sustained on the last green flag run, because this might have been race over. He did have his fast repair still in his hip pocket, and he may end up having to use it here, as will, I'm assuming, both Rodriguez and Austin Grover.
Indeed, so Grover took a incredibly hard shot to the outside wall, although he ended up with some of the least amount of damage from the incident other than Durand. Man, it's hard, and that's the point that you made earlier. The banking here is so steep that if your car gets out of shape, you can save it. It's a little easier to save these cars at this track than at other places because you have that extra banking that might set your car going to the inside rather than the outside. But when you lose it a ton. And we saw that in droves with the 83. He corrected it, then he didn't, and then he just went straight to the outside wall.
Kyle Lewis going to be the race leader when we go back green, it looks like, and he comes into this race 10th in the point standings. He has finished in the top 10 in the first 2 races. Well, he may not be the race leader as everybody's coming to pit road. I didn't realize that pit lane was open this time. I thought it was open the last time around, but still looking for his first top 5 on the season as he'll lead everybody down pit lane here. Tyrion, Valvano, Jason Shu. Keep an eye on that 3-car here during the course of this race, because last week at Talladega, started from dead last and almost picked up the victory, came up just short of Vincent Valvano for that one, finishing in the runner-up position. And as a result of that, Jason Shu, in only one start, is up 6th in the standings. He's ahead of drivers like Garrett Gleason, Kyle Lewis, Steven Doziak Jr., Mike Tellier, and Tristan Mayer, who have all made the 2 starts so far this season.
And we haven't talked much about Jason Shu all race long. This is the first time I think that we've mentioned him, even during some intense battle on the racetrack. He's been really quiet and in a good way. He's stayed out of trouble. He's been able to keep that 3-car in pristine condition. He's got a fast repair still available. I would dare say that if he keeps his nose clean, we could be seeing this 3-car be a threat to these other drivers. He's got the pace. We saw that at Talladega. It could just be a matter of time before we see this driver into victory lane.
We are closing in on halfway here. These drivers getting ready to go back green, more than likely around lap 22, which should have us around the 33 to 34 laps to go mark. Now these drivers, they are going to 4 different types of racetracks during the course of this season. We've already been to 3 of them, including today: Daytona, Talladega, and iRacing Superspeedway. Next week, we're going to be heading to the 2008 version of Daytona, and then we'll be revisiting all of these tracks during the course of the remainder of this 9-race schedule. So, obviously here today, drivers that are having the good luck, drivers that are not having quite as good luck. I mean, this is a go-to-school period, I would think, for them, because we're coming back to this racetrack 3 races prior to the finale. If a championship is on the line, you've got to kind of have some stuff, some data to go back and look at from earlier on in the season to make sure that you get the max points, keep yourself in the championship picture, depending on where you are in the point standings when we head back here later on in October.
You absolutely do. You have to keep any advantage you can in your playbook, and this is definitely a feeling out race for some of these drivers. This track is not new to some of these drivers. I know a couple drivers in the field that have been racing on this circuit since its conception back in 2002, 2003. So knowing that it is a different platform and with different physics and everything, but it is still a similar circuit. It's a familiar circuit for these drivers to run on. That being said, it's always good to keep a basis on what you have to do in order to get back to these tracks. And same with Daytona, Talladega, knowing that those 2 tracks, and we're going to 2 different versions of Daytona as well. So knowing the differences that you'll have to fight with the 2008 version with the bumps versus the freshly paved version. Talladega going back there's a lot of these drivers that already know what they have to do in order to come out on top there, and then back to this track. What I've noticed is that these guys are learning that they can run in big packs, but when they get out of shape, every driver has to be aware of what's happening because these cars are going so fast and there's so much room. I think sometimes that these drivers forget that they have so much less aerodynamics than they normally would, considering that the top speeds here are about the same as you'd see at Talladega, but because the track is so thin, you feel like you can make so many more abrupt moves, and that unsettles the car more than you would see at a thinner racetrack. So learning how to make moves and do them efficiently rather than getting the car unsettled.
It's interesting you bring up the speeds here too, because the old Coca-Cola Superspeedway, you would run that racetrack anywhere from 225 to 235 miles per hour in the draft. They've made the setup with these cars here today where you can only really top out around 198 to 200. So with backing down that speed, it takes away something that Coca-Cola Superspeedway is more famously known for, and that's with the high speeds you would carry into the corner at over 200 miles per hour. You'd have to worry about that right front tire heat building up and the ability to be able to turn through the corner. Now these drivers don't really have to worry about that. A lot more flexibility of how much movement they can have in these corners.
They definitely have more flexibility in the sense that they know what their tires' longevity will be. Another thing that's been taken away as a result of that, though, is being able to be out in front and staying out in front. Because the speeds are limited here, the leader has not been able to stay in the lead of the race for more than a lap or so. So having that as another thing that these drivers have to consider is that, when do I time my run for the finish of the race? We saw Tyrion when everything was happening in front of him, when the bobbles were happening, they started getting close together. Tyrion was able to go to the inside, all the way to the apron against the inside retaining wall to take the lead of the race right at the line. that is valuable information if you're going to carry that over to the end of the race and even the second race that we have coming into this season. Knowing that you can do that, but you just have to time it right, that's some valuable info that you can have that will potentially win you a championship.
I was going to say Michael Norman about to lead his first TNR Superspeedway Series lap, but Kyle Lewis had other ideas. He was able to hedge ahead there when they got to the start-finish line. David Durand with a big push, courtesy of Mike Tellier. He and now Shane Tyrion hook up on the outside line, going to try and fight against Lewis, Valvano, and Grover on the bottom. Now they pick up Norman and Tellier. It's 4 cars on the top, 4 cars on the bottom. Now the question is, where does Jason Shu in that 3-car go? Does he align with the top? Does he align with the bottom? Looks like top side gets the advantage down the back straightaway.
Durand got a big push going to turn 3 from Tyrion, but had nowhere to really go with it. It's Kyle Lewis on the inside, continues to lead the race, got Valvano right behind him, and now Tyrion leaves the 24 out to dry. And that's something that you also have to be aware of, is when are you going to get left behind? Because we've seen a lot of drivers get left in the dust when drivers behind them have a slot and they want to get to the front of the field. They just abandon the guy in front of them, and that's another example of it, as still the leader of the race, Kyle Lewis, he's been able to make that inside line work. The outside line through the turns, just not as quick on the entry. They gain momentum coming out of them, and they're able to pull alongside going down the straightaways, but entry into the turn, not good on the outside line. It's not great on the inside line, but it's certainly more effective on the inside.
Now, worth mentioning, 9 drivers took the green to start this race, not even halfway through, and only 4 still have their faster pairs available. 3 drivers took on their faster pairs in this most recent caution. No surprise that they were Matthew Rodriguez, Austin Grover, and Mike Tellier. And so there's a number of drivers now that are going to be on pins and needles because, as we've seen, the hits that you take here at iRacing Superspeedway, they are hard, they are heavy impact to the front end of the race car around where the engine housing is. These drivers now have to make sure that they preserve these race cars for what's going to still be more than 30 laps. Those other guys, though, you have to wonder what their strategy is. I'm looking at guys like Vincent Valvano and Jason Shu. They've still got their faster pair in their hip pocket. Would this give them the opportunity to be maybe a little bit more aggressive now than they would have been about 10, 15 laps ago?
They certainly have the ability to test the waters more than these other drivers do and try to figure out what they might be able to accomplish late in the race. And they don't have that crutch of, if I crash, then I'm out. These other drivers, they might have to be a lot more careful now that they don't have that mulligan that they used to have. So you're going to see a bit of a dynamic shift. These drivers with one in the hole, they're still going to push as hard as they were. Some of these drivers that are without, they're not going to push, as I say that, 4 wide for the lead, tearing up the outside of the middle line. Now 3 wide for the lead. Still no one with a clear advantage. Kyle Lewis has got a friend pushing him, and that's the only reason why the 18 has been able to have this success. Austin Grover has not left the 18 ever since the restart. This might be the strategy for both Grover and Lewis to try and stay together. I say that. Grover must have heard me. He's gone to the outside to try and get around the 18. But for those guys that have a faster pair, they can't afford to push a little more than these drivers without. The guys without a faster pair, if they wreck and have extensive damage on their car, that's it. Their day is over. And because of that, they're going to have to be a lot more careful than they were in the beginning half of the race.
And I'm almost wondering here, too, you were wondering about Grover and Lewis hooking up together. I'm almost wondering, though, with the way that we're seeing these runs generate, if the hand is forced for these guys to have to make those moves, because if you pull up to try and work with somebody... oh, there they go. Oh, hard hit there for Valvano. Shane Tyrion, Kyle Lewis also get bits and pieces of it. The 38, last week's winner, took the hardest hit there, along with Shane Tyrion, into the very end portion of that pit lane wall.
That are 2 drivers that had a faster pair that they could use. Kyle Lewis, not one of them, but I think they just got hooked and got sent into the inside wall. Did Valvano and Tyrion off the nose of Kyle Lewis going down the front straightaway? That might have been reactionary. I don't know who came down and who went up. I don't know if no, Kyle Lewis definitely went up the racetrack.
Tell there from that camera angle. Let's see if maybe high above will give us a better angle of it. And you mentioned it about the fact Kyle Lewis already a faster pair in the hole. Oh, yep. Definitely can see from there the 18 coming up the racetrack. Not sure if he was planning to side draft. There was certainly no hole for him to be able to fit into, and could effectively be his day done because we already know that the hit you take is not going to be soft here at iRacing Superspeedway, and that's going to no doubt have the 18 at least off the pace. I don't know if it's going to be a case of the car being able to still be competitive in the draft. I say that because last night when we covered the FTF Grand National Series, we saw a car up there inside the top 5 for the second half of the race that looked like it belonged in the Wheel and Modified Series, and somehow it was still able to stay up there and be competitive. So no, it really all depends on when we finally get back green, get into a long run to be able to get an idea of just how much damage the 18 of Kyle Lewis sustained, since he no longer had a faster pair to fall back on.
Something else that I've noticed that these drivers are having to deal with, and it's only cropped up recently, is that because of the way that the track is banked on the straightaways and in the turns, that the least little bit of contact will send the car around. And at other tracks, you don't see this as much, where if you get a little bit of contact on the side of the car, it might be okay. At this track, it seems like any little bump that you get, it's going to send your car into either a slide or just make it unhappy and difficult to control. So I wonder if maybe they're trying to gauge what they can and can't get away with for maybe the second race that they come to in the later in the season to see what they can push for. But if you're trying to vie for the championship, then aggressive testing might be the phrase, but it certainly is a bit of a learning curve for these drivers to try to figure out just how much they can make contact with it, because they have so much straightaway space that you can rub against somebody and try to get them out of line and get them to lose some momentum. But we've seen a couple of times now where it doesn't really work as well as they'd like to, and they end up hooking or just straight up sending the guy out to the wall.
Could very well be the case, and you also consider the fact that Daytona Talladega, yes, there is banking on the straightaways. You've got the banking, obviously, in the tri-ovals for both of those tracks, but not nearly to the degree of the banking you have here on these straightaways. 10 degrees of banking coming off the 36 degrees of banking in the corners that these drivers have to deal with. So there's actually a lot more movement of the car kind of migrating down the track with that higher banking as well. And that could be maybe also part of the reason why we saw the 18 migrating back up the racetrack, trying to counter the fact that his car was drifting down on the banking on the front straightaway. But obviously, though, that contact going to be hurting him for the remainder of this race as he came back down pit road. A long extended stay for him. He'll stay on the lead lap, but only time will tell if he can still be competitive or not. Add Vincent Valvano and Shane Tyrion to the faster pair brigade. So only 2 of our 9 drivers remain with the faster pair intact. That would be David Durand, who is scheduled to roll off from the 2nd position on this upcoming restart, and Jason Shu, who's going to be lined up in the 6th position when we go back green. That is dependent on if these guys decide to maybe hit pit lane on this next lap before we get the 1 to green and possibly top off the fuel tank.
Absolutely. We got a couple of drivers that have gone down onto the pit road. Matthew Rodriguez is one of them. Mike Tellier is another. Jason Shu is a driver that's coming down as well. Austin Grover, another driver that has hit the pit lane again. Valvano will stay out. Tyrion is coming down once again. We'll have to wait for Kyle Lewis to make the round before we see what he will do to go into pit lane. I think he is staying out on the racetrack. So, that being said, what we have now lining up is Michael Norman and David Durand on the front row. Now, Michael Norman, this is his first start in the FTF Superspeedway Series, and you and I are used to seeing him race on NR 2003. This is the first time that I've seen him race on iRacing, and he is doing pretty well up in the lead of the race at the moment. Has been mired back in the middle of the pack, the very limited pack we have tonight, but still a good run for this 21 team. And I think that the NR knowledge is carrying over to iRacing. I know he races on iRacing a lot more than we give him credit for, but good to see him making his debut tonight, and an FRN colleague as well. So always a good support for the FRN boys.
Yeah, as you alluded to, we've raced with him over on the NR Sim at Super Speedways. Very good Super Speedway racer. However, not only making his debut in the TNR Super Speedway Series here tonight, but making his debut on iRacing Superspeedway. Actually just purchased the track about maybe half an hour before these guys got out there for practice. So obviously taking to this Superspeedway quite well and trying to see if in his debut he can pick up a checkered flag in that Hot Wheels Kyle Petty throwback, that number 21 Ford Mustang. Now, one thing we have to keep an eye on here for the remainder of this race is just how aggressive they are going to get. We saw a lot of moves being made in the first 30 laps, but at that point, we only had about 2 or 3 drivers that were a faster pair in the hole. Now you've got more than 2/3 of the field that are trying to keep themselves in one piece by the time we get to the checkered flag. Do we see things a little bit more spaced out, or do these drivers continue to race aggressively? Look at Shane Tyrion. Now, this is legal. Tyrion hung back. He waited until the green came out, passed everybody after the start-finish line. Now, he's out in front. That's the good thing. The bad thing is it's a super speedway. He's too far out in front. Watch for the run they're going to get on him on the back straightaway.
If this was any other track, any other speedway, that would have been a brilliant move. Again, this is a super speedway. It's not going to work as well. You can see the inside line already with an advantage. They're running about 10 mile an hour faster than Shane Tyrion right now. Everyone blows by. Got a little bit of the spotlight, but the 88 quickly goes shuffled to the back of the pack. Michael Norman will retake the lead. Kyle Lewis on the inside with him. Matthew Rodriguez on the outside line in third place, but you've got Mike Tellier lined up third on the inside line. Who leads it at the line? It's going to be Michael Norman with Kyle Lewis right behind him.
Lock and change between now and the checkered flag, but currently 5 bonus points would go to Mike Tellier for winning the pole position. Right now, 5 bonus points would go to Vincent Valvano for having the fastest lap of the race, clocking in at a 54.437. We'll see if anybody's going to be able to top that lap time in these final 24 laps.
So far, everyone shuffling around trying to find what they're going to do on the restart. On the outside line, we've got a couple of drivers trying to make headway. That's Rodriguez and David Duran linking up. And at the moment, Rodriguez with the lead of the race. How long can Duran push? Looks like not very long. We're already seeing the 24 try to get some air in that intake, but looks like that Rodriguez was going to slot in line. I think he's gone back to the outside, not to leave Duran all alone.
Duran is going backwards, though, because he's now put up top 3 wide with Vincent Valvano in the middle. Lewis pushing Norman on the inside line. They're going to clear for positions 1 and 2. Valvano looks like he wants to go up the middle. He's trying to show himself up there, but nobody's taking the bait to offer drafting help. Tellier stays down the bottom. Rodriguez stays way up topside. No drafting help for last week's race winner, at least at this point. Let's see what happens out of 2.
Right now, there was a bobble between the 83 of Grover, and I think that was the 97 that got a little bit out of shape, but they've gotten back together. Michael Norman, the inside line, continuing to lead. He's got Lewis still behind him on the outside line now, though. You've got Valvano being pushed by Duran this time. Duran's been doing a great job of being the pusher. He just likes to get pushed every now and again. We haven't seen the 24 take the lead of the race in quite some time, so you'd think that maybe the roles will be reversed sometime. We talked about it earlier on where Duran is looking for his first win this season. He's been kind of out of luck for the last couple of races, leading the most laps in each of them and then falling short at both Daytona and Talladega. This could be his day. He's got the second place as Vincent Valvano, last week's winner, goes to the lead of the race.
38 out to the point. Duran slots into second. There's Austin Grover on the top side. I think he was working with Duran moments ago. Wow, I'm not sure he knew Mike Tellier was there to driver's left. They almost make some contact, and now Norman gets shuffled down to the inside line. Kyle Lewis is going to pick up Valvano. They're going to go to the point. Watch on that top side, though. Duran helped push Rodriguez to the front. Will the roles be reversed? No, instead Rodriguez, he's going to pick up Shane Tyrion. Let's see what those Toyotas can do lined up nose to tail.
Everyone on the inside of the racetrack except for Tyrion and Rodriguez who are hanging at the back. Now everyone's shuffling out to try and get to the lead of the race. You've got one driver, Grover, to the outside trying to go, but no one's gone with him. Valvano, Lewis, and Norman on the inside, and now Duran goes to the outside to pick up Grover. No, never mind. He's going to use Grover as some drafting help to try and stay up on the outside and keep the momentum, but too little too late. I don't think he's going to have it going through turns 1 and 2. The inside line just too powerful. They got 6 cars right now running the inside line. One thing that is, I've noticed that you can run just as fast at least keep pace with the drivers. If you're by yourself, you get some side draft off these guys. That's what the 24 is doing right now. You're not going to make any headway by doing this, but you will not fall as back or as far back as you might think you would doing this. So that might be what Durant's trying to do, is just stay with these guys, not lose them, and just see where he can slot in line.
I'll tell you what else I'm noticing. The moves are still being made, the runs are still being generated, but I'm seeing a lot more space being given between drivers here in these side-by-side battles. These drivers realizing that most of them are on a paper-thin screen. They cannot afford to be involved in another wreck, or else it is night over early. Still 20 laps left in this thing, a long ways to go, and they all want to make sure they survive until it matters the most.
Absolutely. The only drivers right now that are clear and are safe from any kind of tragedy are David Durant and Jason Shu. Both those drivers still with the fast repair that they can use every one of these other drivers. They have to be very, very careful. And let's speak about Jason Shu again. We talked about it under the last yellow, keeping his nose clean. Notice how he's running at the back of the pack. We don't think we've seen this 3 machine break into the top 5 ever since the restart happened. That's definitely by design. He doesn't want to be in the hornet's nest. We've seen what's happened so far tonight. Just biding his time, waiting for these guys to potentially make a mistake, and he can capitalize, being one of the only drivers that might potentially have a clean car at the end of the race.
Big run for Mike Tellier as he goes up the middle 3 wide. Norman up on the top side picks up David Durant. 3 wide for the lead going into turn 1. Belvano still with Kyle Lewis is going to keep the top position. Norman now starting to fade back. Tellier starting to fade back. They both generated their own runs, but it just didn't seem to get the momentum they needed, didn't have the drafting help they needed going into the first couple of corners as we are at less than 20 laps to go. Valvano looking for back-to-back victories, trying to get himself up there in the hunt for the points lead, leaving iRacing Superspeedway here today. When do these drivers decide it is time to go? When does the aggressiveness and the pinching and the door banging and the side drafting, when does it pick up? We're going to be finding out very, very soon. We're going to step aside for a quick commercial break. If trouble breaks out, we'll break in. You won't miss a bit of the action, though, as we go FRN side by side.
Welcome, race fans. This is Paul Page, the voice of IndyCars. And today we're excited to present another IndyCar event brought to you by the Dark Horse IndyCar Series. From the Unzers to Mears, Foyt, and Andretti, now it's Corley, Peterson, Davies, Gardner, and team. You can expect high speeds, incredible wheel-to-wheel action, and intense drama that you can only get in an IndyCar. So sit back and enjoy your favorite drivers from all over the world take the track. Dark Horse IndyCar drivers, start your engine. Welcome, race fans. This is Paul Page, the voice of IndyCar. And today we're excited to present another IndyCar event brought to you by the Dark Horse IndyCar Series. From the Unzers to Mears, Foyt, and Andretti, now it's Corley, Peterson, Davies, Gardner, and team. You can expect high speeds, incredible wheel-to-wheel action, and intense drama that you can only get in an IndyCar. So sit back and enjoy your favorite drivers from all over the world take the track. Dark Horse IndyCar drivers, start your engine.
We welcome you back here to iRacing Superspeedway. Closing out 15 laps to go, we ride on board with the third place car. of Kyle Lewis. Well, third, second, that's what the transition was there through 3 and 4. Following in the tire tracks of our current race leader, Vincent Valvano. Had to chuckle when we had that onboard shot looking at the back bumper of the 38. Vincent Valvano has pack leader on the rear bumper of that Ford Mustang, and that's what he's doing right now, leading the pack as he's trying to go for back-to-back wins here. But look at the Toyotas up on the top. Rodriguez and Tyrion have found each other once more.
These are two drivers that have been around each other quite a bit in recent weeks, so they know each other's driving style fairly well. They might be able to work together. This is also Tyrion's first start in this series. The last time that we've seen Tyrion was on a different league, and he was driving some older race cars, the 87 cars. Tonight, he is running in the modern car. He's doing extremely well, and right now, going to the front, he's got Tellier right behind him. This is another driver that is used to racing with Tyrion, as both Rodriguez, Tyrion, and Tellier have been around each other quite a bit in recent weeks in different series, but right now, linking together, they might trust each other quite a bit, and this is the first time I think a two-car tandem has had this big of a lead since the start of the race.
I think you're right. The question is, how long can Mike Tellier stay locked to the bumper of Shane Tyrion? Let's actually go inside the cockpit of the 97. Keep an eye on the dials here. We'll see if we end up seeing any red flashing or any water temp dial pegged. Backs off a little bit there from the 88 to maybe try and get a little bit of clean air to the nose, into the engine intake area. Make sure that that thing does not overheat. And that's going to allow that outside line with Vincent Valvano and David Durand to cycle around them and move to the front. So now, we wondered, when is it time to go? Now we're starting to see, less than 15 laps in, the two-car tandems, they're formulating up and making some headway.
Trying to figure out who they trust to take to the front of the field, because building that relationship up with the driver throughout the course of the race might be good for the end of the race, trying to see who you trust to push and or be pushed by. So right now, Vincent Valvano again back to the lead of the race, but Durand, again, he hasn't led, I don't think, at all tonight, trying to get to the front of the field for the first, one of the first, if not the first time, but still cannot get it somehow. Again, we touched on he's trying to make this his first win this night, but it just seems like whenever the leader gets to the front, unless you've got some really solid help behind you, you're just not going to go anywhere. And right now, Durand's been being good at pushing cars, but he hasn't been pushed much by anybody tonight.
You mentioned the fact that David Durand, look at Shane Tyrion and Matthew Rodriguez back there using all 5 lanes down the back straightaway, having some fun mid-pack there. But, in the case of David Durand, mention that he was the driver that led the most laps in the first 2 races of the season. If he has led a lap here today, it's only maybe been 1. It's certainly been the single digits. I'm not necessarily certain who's led the most laps. It might be Vincent Valvano here in the second half of this race that's going to pick up those valuable 10 bonus points. But really, as you pointed out earlier on, nobody has really been able to keep the race lead. And something I think that we kind of have to keep in mind here when we get to the end of this race, in terms of what I've observed of the ability of drivers being able to generate runs and their capability of doing so. I don't think you necessarily have to be the race leader, second place, or third place when you come off of turn 4 coming around to take the checkered flag. The reason being was a move that Shane Tyrion made all the way back around lap 20 to 25. I can't pinpoint the exact lap that it was.
Whoa, 83's gone around right in front of a lot of these drivers. That's going to bring the caution out. Sorry to cut you off, but Austin Grover pounds the inside retaining wall, finds himself going the wrong direction. Solo car spin. I think he had help. We're under yellow for the 3rd time tonight.
Grover going to get the thing refired and drive away from the incident. Not certain who the car was that got him. Possibly the 3 of Jason Shu. Will go back and take a look. Grover already has used a faster pair, but now this gives the drivers an opportunity to kind of sit back, take a breath, but then have to go back to work with less than 10 laps to go. Let's go back to the middle of 3 and 4.
This is, I believe, what happened here. There was some contact made in the left rear of the 83 by Durand. Well, actually, I think that they just didn't lock up correctly. I think that Durand was trying to lock with Grover in the middle of the turn. It just didn't work out.
Like he had the bumpers lined up, and then that 83 experienced that push-up we were talking about. Went up that groove higher. That lost him momentum, and Durand just wasn't able to back off in time. That led to the contact between the two. Now, good news for Austin Grover was he really didn't make any contact with the wall. The bad news is there's such a transition from the somewhat flat apron and the 36-degree banking in the corners. I think that's where he got quite a bit of the damage on his machine, especially around the splitter area and I think the right rear quarter panel. So we'll see how that's going to affect him aerodynamically, but it could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. Definitely could have. He could have hit straight into the inside wall, but thankfully did not happen. He doesn't have a fast repair, but will still try to get the damage on the rear end of the car repaired. And this is good news for all of these drivers. And the big reason is because we hadn't touched on it all night because we really didn't have the need to, but we didn't really know how far these drivers could go on a fuel run. And we were going a pretty long way under green flag conditions. These guys might have had to pit under green at some point to make it to the end of the race. Now with the caution coming out, they've been able to pit and they'll be able to get to the end of the race no problem with the fuel and tires they'll get. So no fear of losing your favorite partner out on the racetrack.
Well, that was the longest stint we've had so far under green flag conditions, 15 laps. You wondered about the fuel situation. Jason Shu in the 3 electing to stay out.
Interesting.
Now, he's already got a fast repair available to him still. I don't know if that comes into play. He may actually think about coming down pit road here this second time by, potentially to be half a lap to a lap better on fuel than everybody else. This is going to be interesting to see what the call is for the 3 when they come out of turn 4. Does he duck onto pit road? Does he decide to stay out and be the race leader when we go back green? This could get very, very interesting in terms of what his strategy is right now. If he stays out, then Lewis, Valvano, Norman, and Tyrion will be the top 5 behind him. But of course, if he pits, everybody is going to move up 1 spot. We're going to be getting the restart, I do believe, with 9 laps to go. We should have, 7 laps to go. 8 laps to go. 8 laps. I'll get it right one of these points. 8 laps to go. The light should go out atop the iRacing pace truck this time, and the 3 is not going to duck onto pit lane. So, unless he's not planning to come to pit road at all for the remainder of this race, he is looking to go 27 laps on what he's got in the tank.
Now, might be able to make it work. Certainly, I don't think within 27 laps it would have been too far for these drivers to make it to the end of the race. But what I am interested in seeing is that it might have been strategy to stay out of the racetrack, given the fact that, like you said, he still has a fast repair left. So even if he is swept up into something, he's fine. And now he thinks it's go time. You've spent the last 47 laps running at the back of the pack. It's now time to make your moves. I do feel like that Shu's got a fast machine and he's just been holding back. But if he gets swept up in a crash, these drivers behind him, they won't be able to repair their car to anywhere near what it would be to be at race pace. And Jason Shu will have that fast repair. He's thinking long game. If I'm caught up in something, then it doesn't matter to me. But all you guys got to have to be careful. So he might drive some aggressive defensive maneuvers to make it so that everyone behind him stays in check while he's been able to basically run wherever he wants to. He'll line up the leader. Shane Tyrion will be in second. And you've got Lewis, Duran, Valvano, Tellier, Norman, Rodriguez, and Grover. That is your full field. With the amount of laps we have left being less than 10 to go, what are we going to see these drivers do? The aggression will definitely ramp up between these drivers to try to get to the end of the race. But that being said, we also have quite a few drivers that might try to get to the lead of the race by a 2-car tandem and maybe run their car into the ground to do it. A lot of drivers were complaining about water temps. I don't think it matters now. We'll have to see if the 2-car tandem can work and get out front and actually get away, because we haven't seen that so far tonight.
At the 18 and the 38, they're going to line up nose to tail, second and third in that inside line. You've got Tellier in the 97 and Rodriguez in the 57. We've seen them tandem together, third and fourth on the outside line. So where do the alliances begin at this point in time? There's going to be 8 laps to go, green flag back in the air. 2 cars lined up on the inside line, 3 cars nose to tail on the outside line. Shane Tyrion is going to get the advantage because of that. He might clear for the top spot going into 1. Shu tries to stay to the left rear quarter panel. They'll be dead even through the center of the corner.
Still 2x2 going through 1 and 2. Tyrion with a slight advantage. The outside line with a more advantage with 3 cars being nose to tail. The inside line's got 4, but they're kind of spread out down the back straightaway. A big push by the outside line will get Tyrion, Durand, and Tellier to almost clear Jason Shu by the time they get into turn 3. Here comes Durand to the inside line. He's going to leave Tellier, or he's going to bring Tellier with him, leave Tyrion on the outside.
Now Kyle Lewis, third on that inside line, trying to draft up to the bumper of the 97. He's got a big run coming out of turn 4. Valvano not too far behind him. Let's see if the 18 jumps to the middle. He's got a big run, but can he take it anywhere? Tellier continuing to push David Durand out in the race lead. 7 laps to go here at iRacing Superspeedway. Still, all 9 cars in contention. Throw a blanket over them, less than a second separation.
Single file on the inside line between Durand, Tellier, Lewis, and Valvano. Might want to try and settle into a run. I'm surprised, and what's something that's surprising to me is that no one's been able to use the inside line, i.e. the apron line, as well as I thought they would. It's not out of bounds here. Some of these drivers might just be uncomfortable with the transition going off the racing surface and then back onto it, in fear that if by the time that you get to the turn, you might not be able to slot back in line and you're going to lose more positions than you would have if you had gone around the outside line. So for anybody at home, and just thought about this, but for anybody at home that's wondering why they're not using that line as much, and that's probably the reason. But right now, still running the inside is going to be Durand, being pushed by Tellier. Everyone shuffling at the back of the pack. Shoes falling back to the back again. That 3 machine, I don't know if this is strategy or maybe there is a problem with the 3 machine that we didn't see earlier. Maybe he accumulated some damage over some contact, but right now just barely hanging on to the pack at front.
Well, I think he's still okay. As long as he's within about half a second of this lead group, he should still be in the draft. Maybe just kind of biding his time here. It worked for him last week at Talladega. He almost picked up the victory, came up just short of claiming the victory in his debut as we go 3 wide for the lead. As this is going on, I want to touch on that question you had about that, why they aren't using the apron on the back straightaway. The reason is, if you're on the racetrack, the gradient banking goes from left to right. When you go down there on the apron, there's actually gradient banking from right to left. So you're actually counter banking when you go from the apron back onto the racing surface. It's very unsteady for the race car.
They were almost 5 wide going down the front straightaway between Tellier, Valvano, Grover, Durand, and Tyrion. Basically throw a blanket over 5 cars in the top 5, and that was the battle for the lead at one point, but they've settled it back out to single file. It's Tellier, Grover, and Tyrion. The inside, the outside now has got Valvano and Lewis trying to make up some ground, but they fall into line as, well, Tyrion tried to go to the outside line, but nobody was willing to go with him, and they've left him out to dry. Now, one thing I'm super impressed with is that these drivers, that they've been able to get to the lead of the race and hold the lead of the race. Tellier and Grover, speaking of, Valvano almost got spun around behind them, but Tellier's been able to keep Grover behind him. Now, whether that's by design or not, these two are just trying to tandem together, that's one story, but you've got a lot of challenges from the outside and middle line behind them, and they're still able to stay in front.
Gonna be 4 laps to go. Mike Tellier has had hard luck in the first 2 races of the season. He's still looking for his first top 5 on the year. Only 1 top 10 in the first 2 races, and he's trying to make his way up into the top 10 in the overall point standings. How wide is he gonna make that Toyota Camry bumper? Grover taking a peek, getting a little loose there as he does so. Valvano and Lewis, when did they step out of line? Because we've seen them work together all day long.
So far, this run has seen the most single file action that we've seen all race long. Trying to ride out to the end of the race, although I say that, and Lewis behind Valvano got a little bit unsteady, almost spun the 38 around. Grover, too, got unsteady on the way in and almost clipped the back end of Mike Tellier. And on the corner exit of 4, we saw a lot of drivers, including the aforementioned Grover and Lewis, get a little bit squirrely coming out of there. So as the race progresses, we're seeing these drivers more and more on edge as their aggression ramps up, trying to get to the lead of the race, because now it doesn't seem like anybody's willing to go to the outside line ever since the restart or the last couple of laps. Mike Tellier, this is his race to lose now. He's just got to hold back whoever has a fight on the outside or inside, mirror drive, if you will, and he might just walk away with this win.
Less than 7.5 miles to go as they make their way down the back straightaway. All drivers on that inside line, 1st through 8th, nose to tail, hugging the yellow line. If you're gonna make a move, you're gonna have to go up top. I don't think there's any way Mike Tellier is going to give up the bottom. Grover trying to go a little bit lower there. Bear in mind as well, you've got that non-out-of-bounds area, that yellow area right there. Someone might actually try that lane if they can get hooked up, try and take a slightly shorter way around the racetrack. But again, you run the risk of then the banking transition when you get up into turn 1. Valvano took a peek like he was going to go to the top side that time by into turn 1. Tucks back in line again. Tyrion wants to go up high. Nobody's willing to go with the 88 as they head off 2.
Will Grover step out of line going down the back straightaway? And if he does, who's going to go with him? We see some drivers in the back make contact. That was Lewis and Norman making some contact. Lewis spins down the back straightaway hard into the inside wall. No caution for that. We stay under green. Kyle Lewis with heavy damage. And now the battle's at the front of the field getting ramped up as now Durand on the outside line with nobody going with him. Trying to get to the front of the field. Does Grover step out of line on Tyrion?
Austin Grover so far this season, 2nd at Daytona, 3rd at Talladega. He's been in the podium in back-to-back weeks. He'd like to complete the sweep with a win here today at iRacing Superspeedway. But Tellier is the guy he's got to beat. Valvano, who's led the most laps, slots into 3rd. Durand, who's been the best pusher all day, he's in the 4th position. And Norman would love to win in his debut. That's your top 5 as they're all single file, nose to tail on the inside line, off of 2 for the final lap.
Down the back straightaway for the final time. What can Grover do? What can Valvano do? What can Durand do? As nobody seemed to have a challenge for this 97. Durand to the inside line on Valvano will try to make a sweep to 3rd place. Grover biding his time. Might try to make a move going down the front straightaway. Remember, he can duck below the yellow line if he wants to. Setting up a run. Look at Rodriguez to the middle of the racetrack up back there for 5th place.
Big push here, Rodriguez to Durand. We're going to go 4 wide, maybe to the line. Durand with a big run. Grover with a big run. David Durand is going to win here at iRacing Superspeedway. There were about 4 different runs generated out of turn 4. It was just a question of who was going to have the speed. Back to the start-finish line, and Durand finally breaks into the win column after leading the most laps in the past 2 weeks.
A 4-wide finish for the win was what Durand had to do. Hadn't led hardly any laps all night, but then at the very end of the race gets the run and to the inside. Had a push. He'd been pushing everybody all night long, and finally he gets someone to help him to the front of the field, and he'll capitalize on a win tonight. No longer the bad luck for this 24 team, and you couldn't have predicted what Matthew Rodriguez was going to do. He hung back at the back and then on a last lap charge almost won the race. He was only 87 100ths of a second outside of the win. He could have done it. In fact, the top 4, maybe not even the top 5, were all a 10th apart from each other. That's incredible.
David Durand mentioned coming into this race, 3rd in the point standings, 40 points back, but the way they've got the bonus point system here in the TNR Sunday Super Speedway Series, he's going to reap in a lot of bonus points, and he could very well, if not be the points leader, be very close heading into next week, because not only does he get the points for winning here today, he also gets 10 bonus points for picking up the most spots from his starting position to his finishing position, up 6 from when he started this race from 7th place. Another driver who sniped some bonus points would be Jason Shu. We mentioned that Vince Valvano had the fastest lap of the race, which would have given him 5 bonus points. Well, in the closing stages, a 54.351 is going to put Jason Shu in line for those 5 bonus points. And I have to wonder, Anthony, we saw him drop back, and we wondered what that was all about. I wonder if he dropped back enough to get the toe necessary to get that fastest lap of the race.
Could have been. Thinking about the long game is Jason Shu, and that wasn't a bad strategy if that is indeed what he was meant to do. So a lot of strategy for the rest of the season being played out, and a lot of it was in the last 2 or 3 laps of the race. We really were impressed with the amount of runs that these drivers were getting. I mean, Matthew Rodriguez all of a sudden had some speed come out of him. Austin Grover was running around 2nd place and was pushing Mike Tellier for the longest time, but then he felt it was time to go. But everyone was not prepared for the run that David Duran was going to get. And Shane Tyrion as well. Shane Tyrion comes up and gets a second place spot in the 88. That was incredible run at the end of the race to try and get him or try to get Duran in the line, but everyone just couldn't have anything for the 24 team. You got to feel bad, though, for Kyle Lewis getting spun on the penultimate lap going down the back straightaway, ended up out of the race so many laps down, or only one lap down, really. He was only one lap down, but out of the race with a chance to win. Kyle Lewis had one of the fastest cars on the racetrack, but then just got clipped off the front end by Michael Norman, and that was unfortunately his day done. But wow, what a finish. 4 wide at the line.
Almost 5 wide there, and you talked about Tyrion. He was actually a big reason why David Durand was the first one back to the start-finish line, offering a little bit of drafting help there, coming down to the stripe. There it was again. Rodriguez almost gets the 3rd position from Austin Grover. Those two, they were only 2 1,000ths of a second separation for the final spot on the podium, and as you alluded to, just a 1/10 of a second separating the entirety of the top 5. It does not match the closest finish of the season. 67 1,000ths of a second was the difference between Durand and Tyrion here. But when you consider the fact of how many drivers were that close coming to the start finish line, if we were taking the cumulative of the top 5, I think we would call it the closest photo finish of the season by far.
Absolutely. It was incredible. 6 100ths from first to second. Then back to, if you look at it, actually, look at the gap between 3rd and 4th place. Grover and Rodriguez, 2 1,000ths of a second separated 3rd and 4th place. That's incredible. A tiny margin between 3rd and 4th. And that was all it was for Austin Grover to get back into a podium spot. That's 3 straight races with a podium finish for Austin Grover. He's got to be feeling pretty good about that one as well. But absolutely, all the way down to the end, and you'd think that they'd be more spread out or even have an attempt to be spread out, but it just goes to show that even no matter how far you go into a run, you will find people behind you and beside you that will be right with you at the end of the race, no matter what the circumstances are. And that was incredible to see everybody less than 1/10 of a second, or make that 1/10 of a second. Everyone less than 1/10 of a second, the top 5, that is.
Well, you know that when you come to a super speedway that it's known as Big Thunder, you can expect some big things and an exciting finish. That's what we got here today. It's going to be really interesting to see when all the bonus points are tallied, who is going to be our points leader heading into the 2008 configuration of Daytona next week. It could be David Durand with his win. It could very well be the guy we're about to talk to, as you alluded to. 3 podium finishes in a row. Let's see if we can dial up Austin Grover. Hey, Austin, Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, guys, how's it going?
Going good. Man, we just documented what a start you've been off to here this season. Back-to-back-to-back finishes, all up inside of the top 3, in the conversation for the victory off turn 4 every single week. So close to picking up this one, but we saw early on in this race just how easy it was to generate runs and to carry that momentum down the straightaway. Almost were able to pick it up there. What little more do you think you needed to be able to get those guys at the start-finish line?
Well, that last lap, I was drafting Mike Tellier as best as I could. I knew he was laying back, trying to not let me get a run. That would have been about the only way I really could have generated enough to get a go at him. I tried to back up the entry to 3, but he backed it up with me. So I knew from that point we weren't going to win. I just didn't want us both to be sitting ducks. About all I could have done was try and pull a snooker on him a little bit earlier going into 3 and 4 and get him up the track. But he's a great racer. I knew I couldn't pull it off on him. So I kind of was just like, hey, we're going to finish where we're going to finish in this one. Once we got the white flag, I knew we weren't going to win it because he was racing like a super speedway veteran.
You certainly did have a good run all throughout the race. A couple of close calls and a couple of spin, or at least one spin that the 83 team did have to suffer tonight, but you still managed to get a 3rd place, a 3rd straight podium of the season. And you did it by 2 1,000ths of a second. That was the gap between yourself and Matthew Rodriguez at the line. Incredible run to get into third place. But what was the racing like on the circuit from a point of view of a driver? Up in the booth, we could see a lot of drivers trying to feel out where was the best place to run in the racetrack and try to get the jump on somebody else. What did you have to do here tonight in order to get your run going and able to put your car where you needed to have it?
To be honest, about the only thing you could do to really get runs was have a drafting partner and build up that momentum from, a little bit of a long distance run. You couldn't really be right on someone's bumper and jump out. You had to fall back just a little bit to build up some momentum so you could jump out, even if you had someone pushing you. And then the runs, they died off so quick. If you only had like two cars challenging another two cars, the outside line couldn't hold up to the inside. But once you were down the straightaways, it was pretty well even. It was just in the corners that extra height and the wider turn radius in the corners. You were kind of just done for if you tried to take it too wide into the corners.
Austin, one of the most incredible things we saw in this race was the save you were able to have there from the race lead. I think it was Mike Tellier got you in the left rear quarter panel. That thing was flat sideways in the middle of 3 and 4, and you were able to get that thing pointed the right direction. I mean, how in the world were you able to do that?
To be honest, just straight pure luck. I honestly don't know how I held on to that. It was crazy.
Was able to keep you in the running of this race. You bring it home, as we mentioned, your third straight top 3 finish. No doubt going to be in the conversation for taking the points lead heading into next week at Daytona. We'll have to see when everything is calculated, but no doubt about it, the consistency and the momentum on your side. You just kind of get the feeling we're going to see this 83 in victory lane sooner rather than later. So we're looking forward to that, and we're now going to give the opportunity to thank some sponsors and do some shout outs.
Yeah, I'm hoping we wind up in victory lane, to be honest. I want one of those little win stickers on my car. But as far as shout outs go, huge shout out to you guys there at FRN for broadcasting these and helping us get this series going. It's awesome. Shout out to TNR for always putting on great racing. Any series I run with these guys, and I have been with them for years. I started racing, I think, in TNR back in NASCAR Thunder 2004 in an offline league we ran back in, I think it was like '07. I've known these guys for years. I love racing with them. It's always a great show. I want to give a huge shout out to my fiance. I left a family gathering about 20 minutes before they did to get here for the race. Shout out to our daughter Ellie. She's now howling like a dog because that's what she does. She's 2 months old and she likes to make noise.
Well, that's Austin Grover. He brings it home third place here tonight at the iRacing Superspeedway. Once again, congratulations there, Austin. Keep this momentum up, and maybe we'll talk to you next week in Victory Lane when we get back to Daytona.
Thanks, guys.
How about we get the guy that almost pulled it off here tonight in his debut? Let's talk to tonight's runner-up finisher, Shane Terrian. Shane, Anthony, and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
I got you.
And I mean, what a debut for you here tonight, up in front for a couple of times, almost led that final lap, tried to side draft we saw there from third place, got up to second, tried to get alongside that 24 but couldn't quite do it. Looked like you had a perfect plan set up there off of turn 4. What little more did you need?
I needed someone, excuse me, I needed someone to cut down in front of me off of 4 earlier, but it didn't happen. But I mean, I'll take second. I finished second in Superspeedway leagues a lot, apparently. So, I mean, I guess I'll just keep doing that.
You certainly had a pretty good run tonight and was trying to get up to the lead of the race. Now, it was an incredible run to the finish, a 4-wide finish that saw you in second place. But during the race, we saw a lot of moves being made by a lot of drivers. What was the strategy in order to time a run to try and make a move? Because it seemed like the guy that got in front and stayed on the inside line, unless you had some help on the outside line, it didn't seem like that the outside was going to go anywhere. But what was your strategy throughout the entire race to get into the second place?
Not lead. You don't want to be the leader. I think bogs down way too much. I was hoping I would be like mid-pack on the last lap, but I ended up being the last car on the last lap. So I don't know if that paid dividends, but yeah, my strategy was just be mid-pack the entire race or in the back, but not lose the draft because being in the front is just no man's land. So yeah, just kind of play the draft. Don't be in the lead until final 100 feet.
We saw a lot of drivers kind of go to school, see what their cars were capable of doing, what kind of runs they could generate in the first half of this race. Sometimes it worked, other times it didn't work. We saw nearly the entirety of the field have to use their faster pairs in the first half of this race. It kind of looked like things were calming down a little bit there before you guys got to the 10 to 15 laps to go mark, at least up here in the booth. Is that what it felt like down there as a driver as well? Were you guys just kind of settling in and trying to preserve your stuff so that way you had your cars in one piece when it was the checkered flag on the line?
I don't think we were settling in. I think it's just because nobody wanted to be the leader. Not a single person did not want to be the leader. So I think it was Tellier who did that. So uh, but yeah, everyone was just riding, and then I think the last couple laps people were seeing what they could do and all that. But yeah, it's I don't think we were calm at all.
Well, a great run for you here in your debut. Second place at the iRacing Superspeedway. Congratulations on that. And now we're going to give the opportunity to do some thank you sponsors and shout outs.
Well, thank you guys. 'Cause you guys are my sponsor. I don't have a scheme for this car though. This is an old scheme. I haven't ran this one in years, so I got evil controllers on it. I don't even know what sponsors are on this thing, but thanks for you guys for broadcasting, and then TNR for having me. It was fun.
That's Shane Tyrion. Great debut here tonight in the TNR Super Speedway Series as he brings it home runner-up at the iRacing Super Speedway. Congratulations once again, and hopefully we'll see you back next week, see if maybe you can finish one position better when we get to Daytona.
Yeah, hopefully.
And let's now go down to victory lane. We mentioned it. Past 2 weeks, he's led the most laps, but he has not been able to finish up inside of the podium tonight. He didn't lead the most laps, but he gets the most important position of the night, P1. Let's talk to David Durand. Hey, David, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you guys.
Man, we talked about it coming into this race. You spent so much time out in front in the first 2 races of the season, but we're not able to bring home that checkered flag. Here tonight, you finally break into the win column. Congratulations on that. But I mean, how nerve-wracking was that final lap? Because you weren't leading there coming out of turn 4, had to generate a run and hope that all the pieces fell into place down that final 100 feet to the start-finish line.
That last lap was pretty intense. We didn't know what run was going to come, so timing it pretty right was pretty key right there in the last turn right there. If I didn't get hit a bump from Rodriguez, because I saw him coming, so I was trying to block his run, then and Tarian was right there on the inside, so just got a little hit and just trying to just make some room right there, and making a 4-wide finish at the line was pretty intense. So it was really, really nerve-wracking.
And one thing that I noticed that throughout the entire race is that your team and your car didn't feel very comfortable at the front of the field. At least it didn't look that way while we were watching it. We saw that you'd get up and try to take the lead of the race throughout the middle and last part of it, but just couldn't quite get there. And then finally, someone ended up pushing you to the finish, and that was kind of the break you needed. But what was kind of your strategy throughout the entire race? Was it just to hang back and see what your car felt like, or was it try to aggressively figure out how to get your car to the front for later on when it really mattered?
It was a little bit of both. Early in the race, just trying to see what run was going to work when the last 5 laps was going to happen. But early in the race, yeah, we were just staying back there. Just if there's going to be any chaos was going to happen, it happened. Then as the race became later, then we started just to generate some runs and see what would happen for the last lap. So it turned out perfectly for us at the end.
All this season, David, our talking point of ours has been the ability of these cars to two-car tandem. We saw that here today, but one thing we talk about is that the car that's doing the pushing, having to keep an eye on those water temps, make sure that the engine doesn't overheat. You looked like you were one of the best pushers out there. Anybody you hooked up with, you were able to make forward progress and get up to the front of the field. But this is the longest super speedway you guys are on this entirety of the schedule, 3 miles in length. So did the lengthiness of iRacing Super Speedway play into how long you could stay locked up, especially with the fact that you were usually the car that was doing the pushing?
Yeah, I believe it had a factor. I mean, this is a 3-mile super speedway, so making sure watching those temperatures was really key. Lucky for mine, we weren't in a red at all. I was just being really easy with the pushing, but once I got behind somebody, we were pretty much flying there. So no, it does make a big difference between Talladega and Daytona, in my opinion.
Well, David, the points have been updated, not only with picking up the victory, but also picking up those bonus points for the most positions accumulated from start to finish. You're the points leader heading into Daytona by 2 points over Austin Grover, so congratulations not only on taking the victory, but taking the points lead as well. We're now going to turn the mic over to you and let you do some victory lane thank you, sponsors, and shoutouts.
Thank the Radius Racing, Mike and Terry in there. We were really strong. So I'm just happy to run with these guys. You know, it's three for three on these super speedway races. I mean, we're lucky we didn't get the first two. But that's some bad luck. That's typical speedway racing. But we're happy to get the win tonight. So just thank the Radius Racing, thank the Tellier, Cam Caldwell, and Alonso just running with these guys this season.
That's David Durand. He's your winner here tonight at the iRacing Super Speedway, picking up the victory here tonight in the third race of the season. Congratulations, David. Go and enjoy that victory, and we look forward to seeing if maybe you can double down when we head back to Daytona next week.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Very interesting looking at the stats as they've now been updated in the case of David Durand. In the last 2 races prior to tonight, he led a total of 19 laps at Daytona, 12 laps at Talladega. That was the most of any driver in those events. Here tonight, you asked the question, Anthony, of had he led a lap? Well, tonight, cumulative 5 laps led for the 24 car. But it just goes back to that old adage. Doesn't matter how many laps you lead at a super speedway, just as long as you lead that most important last one.
Absolutely. You can go an entire race at the back of the pack, and as long as you're up there at the end, it really is what all that matters. And we got to see it tonight. David Duran again ran up in the top 5 pretty much all night long, and then on the last lap where he really needed the boost, was able to get it, and he was able to really gauge what his car could do by being the pusher for a lot of the other drivers, really getting to feel out what they could do, so that maybe he would have a better idea of what he could do, and that is what you saw pan out at the end of the race. Shane Tyrion also with a second place, and Austin Grover the top 3. That was a pretty stacked podium at the end of the race, especially because Austin Grover was only able to get onto the podium by 2/1000ths of a second. Rodriguez and Tellier will fall out of the top 3, but the way that this track ran, it was almost akin to just slot car racing, where they would try to find a place and put their car in it. And we saw some good luck happen with some drivers. We saw some bad luck happen with some drivers. We saw some contact. We saw some pushing. We saw some evasive maneuvers. And then at the end of the race, 4 wide finish to cap it off. And again, another finish with a less than 10th of a second margin of victory. And this time it was across the entire top 5.
We talked about the bump that the drivers kind of had to deal with here in the entrance of the corners at the iRacing Super Speedway. They're going to have to deal with a lot of bumps when we get to the legacy version, the 2008 version of Daytona next week. That's going to be interesting to see how they're going to line up the bumpers for some 2-car tandem. And another thing, too, the somewhat unorthodox point system they have here in the Super Speedway series has still got us with some great points battles heading into these weeks. Coming into this race, it was 5-point separation from Gracias back to Austin Grover, and now even closer heading into next week after the conclusion of today's event. 2 points separating David Duran from Austin Grover. So still a great points battle going on for the championship, and that's just in the first 3 races of the season.
Absolutely. A long way to go still in this season. So a lot of the chances for these drivers to really plan out what their rest of the season is going to be like. But yeah, the races we got coming up, definitely going to be worth watching. I'm excited to see how this season plans out, because it's just an interesting way that the interesting way the point system works is that, bonus points will get thrown out. You get extra levels of strategy. It's definitely one for, if you're paying attention to it, it's extremely fun. If you're just kind of casually watching it, you kind of have to take a step back and figure out what's going on. But yeah, if you're watching it intently throughout these last few races, then definitely get ready for some strategy being held at these tracks we're going to. It's going to be one wicked final part of the season. This is only the 3rd race. It's such a short season, but still, the strategy already panning out because Jason Shu ends up with a lot of bonus points today that he wouldn't have accumulated had he not gone to the back of the pack and ran the fastest lap. So bonus point goes to him. Bonus points to other drivers that made their way through the field from their starting positions. So right now, this unorthodox unorthodox point system is paying out to be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. For people watching, they may think that these guys are just out for a Sunday drive, but I guarantee you they are thinking every corner of every lap. But some great pack racing here tonight at iRacing Superspeedway. Anthony, what do you say to some pack racing with some Indy cars at Homestead Miami Speedway?
Absolutely. I'm excited for that as well.
We're going to be doubling down here tonight at the Flatout Racing Network, as within about an hour, we're going to be bringing you coverage of the second race of the season for the Papega Car Championship. That's going to be at the Homestead Miami Speedway with the green flag flying at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to join us for that one. But here tonight, it's David Durand who takes the checkered flag in the third race of the TNR Sunday Super Speedway Series at the iRacing Super Speedway. For Anthony McCurry, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, and we'll see you guys in less than an hour for Papega Car as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.